Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at the beginning of free agency in the 2042 to 2043 offseason. We've been general manager of the Pirates for 5 years now. 2 losing seasons, 3 winning records, 3 playoff appearances. And although we had the worst of our winning seasons in terms of our winning percentage this past year in 2042, we did have our most successful postseason run thus far, making it to the NLCS, where the eventual World Series champion New York Mets took us out. Despite that success on the field, our payroll was cut by about $2 million, or exactly by $2 million. Our budget was cut by our penny pinching owner, Robert Nutting. So what that meant is in the early stages of this offseason that we just completed, we had to trade away and or release a number of our arbitration eligible players, and also had to move on from some potential free agents, most notably longtime excellent starter for us, Ricky Gotti, who is now on the open market. Now, by making those changes, we do have some money available for free agents at this point, but we've got a lot of big holes to fill. But I think it's going to be somewhat unique this offseason when I take a look at the free agents that are available. Not surprisingly, the top end of the market is very expensive. And I just don't feel like there's impactful players that we're going to be able to afford on the market for the most part. You never know. We'll eventually sign some free agents, I'm sure. But I think we're going to try to start off this offseason by making a couple of trades to perhaps use some of the talent in our system. Got a good suggestion, I think, before the beginning of this past season that I wasn't able to implement until now because I'm typically a few days ahead of the episodes that are posted. Believe the suggestion was from 3/4 Badger to potentially use some of our excess outfield depth to add an infielder, kind of repeating the trade we did last offseason when we used some excess outfield depth in the form of one of the top prospects in all of baseball to bring a pitcher and an infielder onto our team. With the guys that we've lost, adding another infielder who's relatively young is probably something we should focus on. And I'd certainly like to add another arm that's a little bit younger. So I think that's what I'm going to focus on initially right now at the start of this offseason. Clearly, we'll be signing some free agents at some point, and you can see I've made a ton of, well, not a ton, but over a dozen offers to minor league free agents to potentially start rebuilding and bolstering some of the areas of our minor league system where we could use a few extra players, although we're actually not in a bad situation. Sometimes at this point, the start of the offseason, we have 15 players on multiple teams, and we're actually relatively heavy in terms of the minor leaguers we have, so probably don't need to go as crazy this offseason. But right now we're focused on trying to improve the major league roster and trying to improve it through the trade market. And I think we found our first target, our pitching target, Mario Tolka. He's almost 33 years old, making almost $4.5 million a year for the upcoming season and the season after. He is extremely popular. I can't help myself. I've got to play the game to try to get the fan interest up and get more people in the seats to make more money. He's an extreme ground ball pitcher who throws in the high 90s, low triple digits, good work ethic, low greed, plus stuff, plus movement, acceptable control. Really nice arm for the bullpen. And over the course of his major league career, he's been a pretty proven major league pitcher. So given that we could use one final arm in the bullpen potentially, and that we need some help selling tickets, I hate to keep coming back to these extremely popular players, but at least in the case of Tolka, he's also a pretty decent pitcher. You can see that they'll only take pretty big-time players or pretty decent prospects straight up for him in trade. But we've pieced together a deal involving Wilson Bastardo, who was our second-round pick in 2040, so this isn't a costless endeavor for us to give him up. Looks like he's going to be a pretty decent hitter with pretty decent speed, but is only a first baseman. He's not good defensively. Can't really play him in the outfield. He's a first baseman slash DH. And given the lack of quality in terms of his defense, I don't view the bat as being so special that he's someone that we need to keep in our farm system. He's 20 years old and he still hasn't made it past rookie ball. Certainly profiles as someone who could be a acceptable and even a plus major league hitter, particularly with the speed he has, but just doesn't bring much else to the table. So we can add him in, and I believe we can get them to retain 55%. Yeah, and then to put it up anymore, we've got to add in another pretty good player. So we're going to go ahead and trade away Wilson Bastardo to bring on Mario Tolka. That is probably it for our pitching staff. We'll certainly be looking for the Rule 5 draft, and if there's someone who is very high quality available 3 months from now on the free agent market, certainly would think about them then. But I don't think we really need to do much else with our pitching. Obviously, it's going to take a hit with the departure of Gotti that's pending. And you can see we did get a nice little bump, I think about 3 points in fan interest there. Losing Gotti is not great for our pitching staff. But bringing on Tolka at least helps us move things in the right direction. We're going to want a 5-man rotation now that we're out of the playoffs. Obviously, we're going to be changing all of this stuff going forward, but just kind of want to get a view of what things potentially look like right now. And keep in mind that we don't have our key prospect, Montoya, on the Major League roster at this point. He's the starting pitcher who we picked up, number 60 prospect in baseball. Picked him up in that trade where we traded away Angel Aguilar, who had a monster rookie season for the Angels. But I think Montoya is going to be a pretty valuable pitcher for us. So I know some of you are already on me for that being a horrible trade, and certainly with the way that Aguilar played last year, it doesn't look great right now. But we still got a potentially very nice pitching prospect in Montoya. And the other guy who's not on our roster but could be is Ethan Fox, who is more of a guy, but we need help in the infield. He's durable. Looks like he can go out and play a respectable third base, both defensive and offensively, if he fully develops. He's not going to be a great player, but we can't afford to have a great player at every position. So we'll see what happens with Fox and Montoya. Expect both of them will be on the Major League team at some point next year. Probably Montoya earlier than Fox. But with the addition of Tolka, feel pretty good about our pitching staff, even though it's only November 20th. And the other player that I'm really focused on in trade right now is Juan Rivera, Bun Bun. 24-year-old second baseman, but he could play second, he could play third, he can play short if you need him to. A lot of speed, nice bunter, nice base runner. His bat is not special, and it certainly has not been special thus far for him at the major league level, where he's put up a 57 OPS plus and a 54 WRC plus a negative WAR in each of the 3 seasons he's been in the majors. But he's been in the majors since he's 22 years old. And at least according to our scout, he's still not even completely developed. It seems like he's a guy who may have been rushed to the majors a little bit. He's durable. He has been up, as I mentioned, for parts of 3 seasons. So he's on his final year at the major league minimum, and he's going to be making about $1.2 million next year. In a perfect world, I would rather bring on a younger infielder. But honestly, for someone that I'm going to get without completely denuding my farm system, he's about as good as it gets, and I think he can definitely slot in somewhere in the infield for us for the next couple years. And similar to the pitcher we just picked up, whose name I've already forgotten. Tolka. Similar to Tolka, the cost for Rivera is not exorbitant. You can see it's actually a pretty similar list to the players that we could have gotten, and we ultimately did get to offer for Tolka straight up. So what I'm thinking about doing, or what I'm almost definitely doing, is I can get Juan Rivera for Xavier Wimberly, who's another former second-round draft pick of ours. We're kind of getting rid of these guys who were second-round picks, but he is not one of the premium outfield prospects in our system. We kind of get to hang on to, I believe it's still 4 guys who are among the top 50 prospects in baseball that are outfielders for us. No, not anymore. It's actually Carlito Rivera's out of the top 100 now, but still, with Henry Gonzalez at 32, Alex Racho at 49, and Julio Castillo at 53. We've got some big-time outfield prospects that aren't far away in Carlito Rivera, even though he's still at the international complex, only 17 years old, is a player who's got a lot of potential. So although Xavier Wimberly is theoretically the number 3 left field prospect in our system, and when we go down the list, he's one of the prospects in our system, although he's not one of the top 200 in baseball. It doesn't seem like a crazy price for me to pay to get a pretty versatile infielder who's got a lot of speed. He's durable. He's respectable to above average to, I'd say even good potentially at second base. Wimberly is going to have a better bat than him with plus contact and plus gap power and good speed. But he only hit .229 in A-ball this past year. Granted, he was only 19 years old, so he's moving through the system at a decent rate. But he's not, I don't think, a difference maker at the major league level. I'm not claiming Juan Rivera is, but we need at this point major league infielders more than we need prospective major league outfielders. So that's why I'm willing to give up Wimberly. And looks like they're going to be willing to keep a big chunk of Rivera's contract, which is great. Every little penny counts for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So we are going to trade away Xavier Wimberly, maybe our 6th or 7th best outfield prospect in our system, for Juan Rivera, who's going to go right onto the major league roster and give us a little more youth and versatility in our infield. And with those 2 moves complete, I think we're just going to kind of sit and wait in these early days of free agency. There's nobody who jumps off the page at me that we can afford, as I've talked about. We do still have money to spend, but we're also going to want to improve our scouting and development budgets by another $14 million just to get them back to where they were next year. So we really probably only have about 5 million-ish to spend on free agents going forward. So my goal, I think, is going to be to try to shop in the bargain basement bin over the coming months. And that'll also give us time to get ready for the Rule 5 draft. We've only got 30 players on our 40-man roster, and we are starting to get through an interesting time in this playthrough where some of the big prospects that we've picked in the draft over recent years are now going to need to be put on the major league roster. Sal Valadez, who was our second round pick in 2038, the first draft we did, number 70 prospect in baseball, split last year between high A and double A. I don't think he's quite ready for the majors, but certainly not someone we're willing to lose, so we are going to move him onto the 40-man. Juan Bin Daoud, who we picked a round later than Valadez in 2038, split last year between single A and high A. Again, he's not ready for the majors, but definitely don't want to lose him. And if I saw a player like Valadez or Juan Bin Daoud available in the Rule 5 draft, I would certainly take him and stash him on my major league roster for a year. So I don't want to give anyone the opportunity to do that. A few other players that we'll need to think about. Sergio Robinson is already 24 years old, isn't quite as good as a prospect of those two, is those other two, particularly since he's a reliever. But we'll spend more time thinking about these guys as I get closer to the Rule 5, but want to make sure to start that we don't lose either of those two pretty important pitching prospects for us. As we talked about, Valadez is the number 70 prospect in baseball, and behind only Montoya, and then Alex Arroyo, who fell to us in the draft a year ago. Still hasn't gotten out of rookie ball. He just turned 20 years old, but he was a player that we were very pleased to be able to take at 13th. But my point about Valadez is he is the fourth best pitching prospect in our organization, and Juan Bin Daoud, or Valadez is the third best pitching prospect in our organization, and Juan Bin Daoud is theoretically the fourth best pitching prospect in our organization. So we want to make sure that we don't lose either of those players to the Rule 5 draft. And just got the reminder for Hall of Fame voting. I don't do the Hall of Fame voting. I don't want to adjust anything on that, push it one way or the other. But you may remember that our former Kansas City Royals star, Bobby Witt Jr., was the number one vote getter last season, but with 63.7% did not make it. Player who put up an 80.6 WAR over the course of his career, and you can see all the awards for him there. The Rookie of the Year, 9 Gold Gloves, 5 World Series titles, 4 Playoff Series MVP awards, 10-time All-Star, and I think he also had a couple of Silver Sluggers, I believe. 2035 and 2032. I know way too much about the mythical Phantom Bobby Witt Jr. in this playthrough. But the interesting thing in about a little over a month on January 1st is going to be to see whether we can get our former player into the Hall of Fame this year. And we got a bunch of the minor league free agents that we were making offers to a few days ago signed. The most interesting one, though, you may remember him from our last episode, I-Sing Chu, 22-year-old who's coming over from Taiwan. We offered him a minor league deal, which obviously he didn't go for. He says he prefers the offer from Hokkaido. I don't know if... I'd like to try to bring him into our system. I think he's a interesting hitting prospect, has decent speed, okay defensively. He's a second baseman, definitely could play him at third with that arm. He's probably actually more of a natural third baseman than a second baseman, actually looking at his ratings. Not a big time bat, but still somebody that I wouldn't mind having in our system. So a minor league contract with an optional signing bonus. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I mean, he might want a bigger bonus, but I'll give you a minor league contract and a $50,000 signing bonus. And he's willing to think about it. If we could get him into our minor league system for $50,000, I don't think that would be a bad thing. I was thinking I might have to offer him a minor league deal with $1.5 million a year or something if he made it to the major league team, and an option to opt out after 30 days. But if we can get him for a relatively small amount into our minor league system, I don't think the guy's a game changer, but we just are going to be at a point with all of the focus that we've had on bringing pitching into our organization through drafts and international amateur free agency, and the fact that we've generally been going for outfielders number one in the draft, I think pretty much every season we've been here. Infield is kind of the hole that we have organizationally, and bringing in someone who can be a competent major league infielder, maybe in the matter of just a couple years into our system, I don't think is a bad thing to be doing. I've continued signing some of the minor league free agents that we've been looking at. Some of them have gone and signed with other people. We've gotten some of them, though. And I-Sing Chu has come back to us and says that he favors our deal right now, so that's positive. Just realized I said an and I know that's going to disappoint one of you. Probably will disappoint more than one of you. So I apologize for that. I'm trying to be a smoother and more professional talker. Speaker would be the best way to articulate it, but it doesn't always happen. Still waiting to find out what happens with Ricky Gotti. Given that we've made those two trades, there is a part of me with the 19 million-ish we have left, even though I really only want to spend about 14 million of it. If we get to a point where Ricky Gotti's demands come down, could we bring him back on a one-year deal? Probably not going to get to that point. It looked like he might have signed with somebody. No. Ooh, he's theoretically a 3-star pitcher, at least according to our scout now, but still pretty good. Still looking for 26.5 million supposedly. Yeah, 23.4 million over 6 years, still way out of our budget. Yisrael Bernay is a guy that's getting a little interesting to me. I don't feel like we need another pitcher, but he is a pretty good reliever. He is also 38 years old and fragile, but not looking for a ton of money. And he's been basically in the majors for over a decade now and been a very effective major league relief pitcher, although he is coming off of the worst season of his career. A guy that we had in our final season of the Kansas City playthrough in 2037, where he made, actually we picked him up in the middle of that year. He made the All-Star team for the Dodgers, and then we traded for him for the stretch run. We don't really need him, so I'm not going to chase him. But I would like to eventually do something in free agency this offseason. And good news, we did get I-Sing Chu signed. He's on a DSL team right now. I think he's too advanced for that. I guess I can go and really check what they think about him if I go to my DSL teams, but I'm sure he's ready for more than that. He's probably ready for even more than A-ball, but we're gonna, supposedly he's ready for more than that. But we'll start him in A-ball next year most likely and keep him down there for a couple of weeks. probably jump him up to AAA after that. And as I talked about, I don't think he's an incredible prospect, but he is a guy who, if he develops completely, could be a useful major league infielder in a perfect world as a backup rather than a starter. So for $50,000 signing bonus to get a guy like that into our system, I think was a good investment. And apparently Ricky Gotti's gone. We knew it was going to be coming. Fan interest decreases noticeably. A 3-point loss, so that completely offsets the gain that we got by bringing on Mr. Tolka a few weeks back. It is what it is. Did get a supplemental first-round pick. Let's see what kind of contract he ended up getting. Not all that much money. I guess it is going to go up, but $123 million over 6 years, so average of just $20.5 million a year. Still more than we could realistically afford. Glad that we got the first-round pick from him for him, although that is going to change our financial situation a little bit, because now with that extra pick, we're going to need to put more money into our draft budget to hopefully ensure that we can sign not just our own first-round pick, but the supplemental first-rounder that we got for Ricky Gotti. So we'll bump that up to about $12 million. And now, given that we want to put about $14 million more into our scouting and development budgets before the season begins, we are very light on the money at this point, which we kind of always knew it was going to be a challenging year for us financially, but we'll probably get to make one move in free agency, and it's a guy making $1.5 million, $2 million most likely. So unlikely that we're going to add a big time difference maker in free agency. Our payroll's probably going to be in that low to mid $70 million area. So what that really means is that the top prospects in our system, the Ethan Foxes, the Jose Montoyas, and particularly the Henry Gonzalez is of the world, are going to be up on the major league team sooner rather than later. I would like to service time manipulate all three of these guys, particularly Gonzalez and Montoya. I'm not too proud to admit that. If we weren't dealing with penny pinching Mr. Nutting, maybe I would be more honorable in how I treated those players, but I can't say that with 100% certainty. I don't want to lie to you. So it's good we got the draft pick for Gotti, but our off-season activity is going to be quite light this year. And given the number of losses that we've already experienced through players we've traded away, free agents that we've lost, players that we declined arbitration on, it's going to be tough for us to get back in the playoffs. We were an 87-win team last year, up 4 games on the Giants when all was said and done. But with the attrition we've had thus far, we're not as good a roster as we had at the end of last season. The hope is that some of the rookies that I was just talking about fill some of those gaps, and I think they absolutely will, but I don't think we're as good a team right now as we were at the end of the season, that's for sure. So once again, we're going to be counting on the Rule 5 draft to save us. Let's see if maybe we can throw a couple Hail Marys in the Rule 5 draft and see if there's some interesting prospects out there for us to bring on board in a couple weeks. And we've made it to the Rule 5, where we have picked up some pretty useful players over the years. Not picking until the 20th pick in the draft. Let's see what's available. Looking at the pitchers, a few guys with some potential. few guys who look like they're decent arms right now. So we'll take a look through all of them, looking at the position players. No one stands out as much in terms of today's ability. A couple guys with a little more potential to look at. I'm going to take a look through things, see if anyone piques my interest, and then we'll also see what Jordan Cavanerio thinks we should do. And it seems like there's actually relatively slim pickings from my perspective in the Rule 5 draft this year, which perhaps means it's a down year for the draft, perhaps means I'm getting more discriminating in my decision making, and perhaps just means that the Pittsburgh roster is a little better than it's been in the past. Probably a little bit of all three of those things. I'm a little bit intrigued by Corey Terrell. I don't think he's going to make our team, but he is a former number 12 overall selection, has never made it above A ball, but he's a durable player, competent defensive player, respectable speed, who looks like he could eventually be a decent hitter. I don't think he makes our team, but I also don't have a real problem with giving the guy a shot. I kind of feel similarly about Luis Rivera. I don't think there's any way this guy who's never been above A ball makes our team. But he's pretty versatile defensively. He's got decent speed. Not excited by any of these guys, but am I willing to give him a chance and bring him into camp as insurance that we don't have a bunch of injuries? Maybe. What does the scouting director recommend? Sergio Schmidt, 33-year-old right-handed pitcher. Meh. Not a lot of movement, average control. For the course of his major league career, he's been a below average ERA plus and a below average FIP minus, but a little better than replacement level. Not that exciting to me. I think I'm going to pick Corey Terrell. I think it's extremely unlikely that he makes our 26-man roster. But there's also potential that we just keep him around for the first few weeks of the season to fill an outfield spot until we want to bring up Gonzalez. And then at that point, maybe Terrell gets hurt at the same time and we put him on the IL. Maybe we can pick up something for him in a trade. I mean, he just might not make the roster, period, but I don't think it hurts to take a flyer on him. Scouting director doesn't recommend we take anyone in the second round. I'm not really that excited about anybody else, so we are just going to go ahead and auto draft the rest of the way here in the Rule 5. A little bit of activity. 4 teams took 2 players. We were one of 4 teams who only took 1 player. So we'll see what happens with Corey Terrell. As I said, I think it's unlikely that he's going to end up making our team, but it's a little bit of insurance against something funky happening in the outfield in spring training. And maybe he develops real quickly or really looks better than our scout thinks he is right now. We'll find out. And the calendar is now turned to 2043, and before we finish up this relatively uneventful episode, gotta find out, is Bobby Witt Jr. finally a Hall of Famer? He was the number 1 vote getter last season, but he was still about 11 or 12 percentage points away from the magical number of 75. I think he was in the low 60s rather than the mid 60s, but We'll find out now. Still is not in the Hall of Fame. And he fell to 48.7% with some of these big names ahead of him. Austin Roberts, who was a closer for us in Kansas City for a long time, a Hall of Famer with his 25.2 career WAR. But Bobby Witt Jr. with his 80.6 career WAR went from 63.7% to 48.7% in the voting. So that is that's not a pattern that you would see very often in real Hall of Fame voting. Now it does look like with Correa, Roberts, Salvador Perez went up this year. He's been on the ballot. Or no, he went down also. But Bobby Witt Jr. just viewed a lot less positively by the voters this year. I mean, Acuna's getting the same numbers that he always got. Salvador Perez in the same range that he's historically been. Maybe it was the novelty of Bobby Witt Jr. being on the ballot for the first time last season, but very strange to see a player that close. And granted, he was still probably 40 or 50 votes away. I forget how many people are voting for the Hall of Fame in real life. Probably not that far away, but he wasn't that close. But for a guy to be 63.7% on his first Hall of Fame ballot and then to drop 15 points to the next season is kind of interesting. So I thought that Bobby Witt Jr. was going to definitely be a Hall of Famer, and I thought he had a decent shot with that 80-plus WAR to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but it has not occurred thus far. The first-year players, Roberts and Correa, first and second in the voting. So we did get a former Royal into the Hall of Fame this year, but it was not the Royal we were thinking about. Actually, kind of an interesting discussion here. He pitched more games in Atlanta than he did in Kansas City. Won more games there, but he saved more in KC, pitched more innings in Atlanta. Better ERA in Kansas City, put up an 11.2 WAR in KC, a 12 WAR in Atlanta. He won his only World Series with the Royals. And he was a four-time All-Star with the Royals. And he was a five-time All-Star with Atlanta. But a two-time reliever of the year with the Royals. Only a one-time reliever of the year with Atlanta. Would be interesting. Oh, I'm trying to figure out who he'd go in as, and I think it was a very close battle, but he goes in as an Atlanta Brave. If I had looked carefully, I wouldn't have wasted those last couple minutes of your life going through his statistics and comparing his two teams. But a former Kansas City Royal, former member of one of our championship teams in the Hall of Fame, but the guy who was on all five of the championship teams we had in Kansas City is not yet a Hall of Famer. So going to have to wait till 2044 to find out what happens with Bobby Witt Jr. And you're going to have to wait till our next episode to find out what happens the rest of this offseason. We'll dig deep into the final days of free agency, maybe making a few more trades, and then hopefully staying healthy in spring training and making some final roster decisions in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.